It's great to be with you. This is a little bit removed from the group, so I hope we can be able to chat a little bit. And I am such a fan of Les Barnett. You know, in the course of politics, you run into a lot of good people, and Les is just one of those patriots that I now aim to that give their time and effort time and time again for good causes and good values and things this country stands for. So, Les, congratulations on leading this group, and I know you'll do an outstanding job. I would share some thoughts with you that I think are on my mind, and maybe not on your mind, but maybe they are too, because I hear people talk about it a lot. First, this country is an exceptional country. It just is. And the things we do and how we do them are so fabulous. They're a product of free people who come together in various different ways to improve their lives and improve the lives of their neighbors. It's a unique thing. It is not this way around the world. And one of the great, fabulous developments in America is free association of people who come together to advance an interest, like you. Forest landowners come together and study, work together, how they can produce more effectively, protect the environment, protect the heritage that they pass on to their children, and do it in a way that I think is so much better than the state-dominated model of so much of the world. And it is just... Thank you. I think that's a big deal. And one of the questions I was asked is, why do we have private ownership in Alabama? Well, there's a lot of reasons, I guess, why. But first, I want to say how good it is. It just is the right thing. It provides a dispersed power, dispersed influence. It allows a free market to work because there are thousands and thousands of people in a competitive environment. And it's just healthy for America. And that's so much better than excessive concentration of wealth and power, I think. And that's just part of our heritage, too, as Americans, the way we've always thought. So I am proud of you and the association that you have here. And I think it's good for the state. I was talking to Dean Guthrie not long, just a little bit ago, and the fact of the matter is we're in a competitive free market environment, and landowners have great common interest with all the aspects of the agriculture industry and all aspects of the forestry industry, but you have some special interest, right, that are contrary. I mean, the people you sell to want lower prices. You'd like to have higher prices. The people that you sell to probably want less competition, and you'd like to see more competition. So it's perfectly legitimate that you would seek to advance those interests and come together and do it. And of course, the fundamental goal for me as a public policy person who's seeking the national interest and the state interest, the goal is to produce more timber in a reasonable, healthy, environmentally sustainable way. And you study every day how to do that. And if Alabama, which I'm sure, I believe we could easily do, were to produce in the next decade 10% more timber, more wood products of value, then that would be a great asset to the economy, much less to the landowner, to the mill owner, to the paper mills, and those who are also engaged in this industry. I just think it's the right thing, and I'm glad and salute you for what you do. One of the things that Lee asked was, why is the government better at providing hunting and the private owners do better with hunting and recreational opportunities? Well, I have a simple answer to that. Your government is incompetent. I mean, we can't. The very concept that 435 congressmen, 100 senators can meet somehow and figure out how to lease your land or operate your land to produce more turkeys or deer is, on the face of it, unacceptable. We are not able, so we're talking about medical stuff. We don't know how to run the medical system. We're incompetent to do that. I mean, you have to ask yourself, what are you competent to do? Ron Johnson, a great businessman, got elected to the Senate. He's just out of Wisconsin. I just like him. But he says we can't manage what we have. He was a businessman. He ran a business, a big business. He managed that business. We can't manage what we're doing. So the idea that people have that your government officials can take over land and run it better than the people who want to be good stewards and turn it over to their children and grandchildren is just false. I just want to tell you. And that is a fact. The same with producing the land. But we have this incentive, this movement, this drive out there constantly that's based on a belief, it seems to me, that the government can do it better. And that's what it's all about. It's the progressive movement again, the seductiveness of the socialist ideal that the government can do better. And I'm not for it. And I guess growing up in the country, that's the way I was raised, and that's the way I vote, and that's what I try to do every day in Washington. And I hope it's the right thing to do. A lot of people disagree. But I still know I am that I'm going to try to reflect Alabama values, the best and highest values our state have, and I think private ownership of property, dispersed power, less control from Washington are our values and all have been, and we need more of that in Washington, not less, in my view. So, while I'm talking about that subject in general, I've been able to travel periodically around the world and to consider America, what we are, how we operate, and the unique advantages we have. What we have in this country is extraordinarily rare. Is unbelievably rare. One of the things that we have in America that we inherited from the British tradition is private property. The ability to get a deed against all claims whatsoever appertaining. What does it say? The warrant defend your title against all claims whatsoever. And this is a powerful concept. People can invest in and make progress when they're able to own something. And it changes their mindset against the government, against your neighbor, against some powerful rich person, a criminal or a thug. Your property is your property, and it will be defended. That is not true in large portions of this world. People who have property defended if they've got the army on their side or the corrupt government officials on their side. But the average guy doesn't have that power. And it comes from this whole legal concept that we basically inherit. We think we are. But it dawned on me one day reading about John Adams in Boston, defended British soldiers before the Revolution, defended British soldiers who shot some rioting Americans and got them acquitted. Maybe they had a rigged jury, I don't know. But I got them acquitted. So what does this tell us? Before the Constitution, before the Republic, we had jury trials in America. And even the King's Army was involved in trials. And that kind of thing is very, very unusual. And I think to some degree we've expanded that. But I want to tell you, I'm worried today. I'm worried that this government that we have is unappreciative of that. It seems to me that they are unappreciative of the power of the Constitution and the laws of this state. And they seem to think that advancing their agenda, their goals, their ideology is the most important thing. And little things like procedure, constitutional traditions, and patterns of accepted behavior are not important. I'll just use my pen and we'll just do it anyway. And we're seeing that, and I'll mention some things right now, we're seeing that with regard to environmental issues and other issues. It's just very, very disturbing, and we should watch it. I see it when the President of the United States declares whole segments of immigration law not to be enforced. The ICE officers, Immigration Customs Enforcement officers, sued the Secretary of Homeland Security in federal court, asserting that the Secretary, this is the union, this is the Officers Association, they sued their bosses, contending that they were being ordered to violate their oath to enforce the laws of the United States. Now just think about that. The judge took it on for a good long time. He eventually dismissed it, but he said nobody's above the law. The law is such an important and powerful thing that we ought to be defending that rather than openly ignoring it about it. We've seen this. Now there's a proposal that the President suggests he'll use the pardon power, which the President has. He'll impart a whole class of people who've been convicted, sentenced according to the law, and he thinks, he asks that Congress pass a law to change the sentencing. And I worked with Dick Durbin, one of the more liberal leaders in the Democratic Party. We did a significant change in the crack cocaine penalties. I thought it was justified, and they eventually came around to my way of thinking, and we passed the bill. All right? But we explicitly did not make that retroactive. Congress decided not to. If you were sentenced under the law before, you served the sentence you were supposed to serve. And in the future, people who sentenced would get have certain advantages that they didn't have before. And so he's just going to use the pardon power to wipe that out. Direct contradiction of what Congress decided to do. So I just would say to you, we need to watch this. We need to watch this. We need to be sure that we preserve, protect, and defend our constitutional heritage and our legal heritage. So that is a matter that you've heard enough about from me. Amen. So timberland in the state, we've got what? 70% of the state is timber, 80% is owned by private owners. So thank you for that and the work that you do. And I believe this private forest ownership is under direct attack, a threat from Washington. It just is. Every day there's some new regulation and seeking government control as we go forward. And I'll mention some things. Now, Lester, you got a clock over there? You good? Now, I know I'm good right this minute, but you need to, you're authorized to, my wife Mary's not here. She knows how to do this. She starts doing this to me. Like, I've heard enough of you, then, boy. It's good to have somebody around that brings you under control. Every time I complain, she has a very simple answer. Don't blame me, you asked for the job. That is a true fact. Ask for it. So, I don't think there's any doubt on this question of government control of forest lands and private control, that the private land in America are better managed than government lands. They just are. And if you put this in charge of politicians to run more and more of the lands of America, manage more and more of the forest of America, we're going to find that it's not going to be well managed either. And it's going to be detrimental to the future of the Republic. And politicians do get involved. And groups do influence Washington, sometimes for good, like you, I'm sure, and sometimes not good. And I just would say to you, we do need to resist that. And we've got, 660,000 acres of land in Alabama managed by the federal government, federal forest land. They got some good foresters and good people, and they try to do their best, but they execute their business based on what the politicians tell them. And it's just not being proven very effective. And if you look at the biggest forest fires and so forth there in government lands, and we need to do better about that, and we do not need to go down the road of expanding governmental power, particularly over private lands. We've had a series of cases. The Supreme Court's been pretty good about it, but the idea is, so you own property on the beach, and you paid $1 million for it, and you'd like to build a hotel or a big home, and the local county commission or city zoning board says, well, yeah, you've got that property, good, you can keep it, you just can't build anything on it. We zone it, no building. So that the Supreme Court said, wait a minute, that's an effective taking of the person's property. If it's uniquely valued, it's based on a residence or a hotel or something, you can't just waltz in and take that without paying. And the Constitution provides for government condemnation. It's in the Constitution, state constitution, state law, but you have to pay just compensation therefore. Private property cannot be taken without just compensation first having been paid therefore. I think is the Alabama law. And that protects your property, your assets from theft by the government. It's a fundamental principle. And it has to be defended. And we erode that away. When somebody can come in and say, well, you can keep the property, you just can't do anything with it that allows you to get any compensation, any value from it. And so, but the Supreme Court, some of these cases have been awfully close, but pretty much they've been with us. But it's a danger out there. We're going to see more of that in my view. All right, let's see. What is happening in particular with you and the forest industry? Well, you had the forest road issue. That was, I think, an overreach. We did not need the federal government trying to dictate how you build a road in the woods to harvest some timber. It's just not a healthy thing for them to do. They're incapable of doing it. So the Farm Bill that did pass, I co-sponsored an amendment to that, the Silviculture Regulatory Consistency Act. That's a pretty good sounding name for it. But it preserved the long-standing principle that forest roads are not subject to EPA permit requirements. We got that passed, and I hope we stop that. Lawsuit protection, had some lawsuit protections in there for landowners. Another issue that many of you are familiar with is waters of the United States. What are waters of the United States? This is a classic example of governmental overreach. You say, well, Jackson, you always complain. I'm telling you, waters of the United States is a classic example of governmental overreach. It just is. So the EPA last year tried to implement a guidance document, not a regulation, a guidance document. You know what a guidance document is? A guidance document is when the secretary, sort of like what President Obama did with the immigration, I'm issuing guidance, just don't enforce these laws. They're not our priorities. Our priorities are these laws, not these laws. So the guidance document would expand the definition of waters of the United States to mud puddles and dried branches and so forth. And but the legal power of this was that this guidance document has almost the same amount of power as a federal regulation or a federal law. If the officials going out and enforcing it are going to enforce it according to the guidance, then it's has the effect of law. A guidance document says this statutory or this regulatory provision means this, according to our guidance document. So it becomes the law in reality. And a guidance document can be done without any public hearing, without any input, without any calculation of economic cost that's being imposed on the landowners or others. And so it's a manipulation. It's a way that unelected, unaccountable government bureaucrats assert control over the American people and their property. That's what it does. They don't even have to have a public hearing before they establish a guidance document that has great power. So we rejected that, and we fought against that. And I offered an amendment to the Water Resources Bill, the Water Bill, that would have blocked the guidance documents from going into effect. We got 52 votes. Over half the Senate voted for it, but it took 60 to defeat the filibuster. And that Democrat colleagues who say they don't like filibusters, they didn't hesitate to use it to kill this provision. And that was that. So we stopped, though. They did withdraw the guidance process. However, now they've said they're going to move forward with a formal regulatory process. And that does allow groups like yours and other groups to be able to at least appear before and publicly and lay out opposition before the regulation is passed. Another issue that's out there that's really frustrating to me is biogenic emissions. They've been trying to talk about renewables and all of these things, but there's a hostility to wood, in my view, that is not sound within certain segments of your government and in the environmental community. So we're concerned about that. Regulations that are occurring can limit the utilization of wood, which I think is a mistake. Now, we had Miss Janet McKay in the office a few weeks ago. She's up for the EPA's air office. She's replacing Gina McCarthy, who's made the head person of EPA. And Ms. McKay, I talked to her about this at some length, and I pointed to the door there in the Senate Russell office building. I said, do you not understand, Ms. McKay, that door has been here almost 100 years. It's liable to be here another 100 or 200 years. It's carbon locked up in this building, not in the air. And somebody planted a tree somewhere and replaced it. That's sucking more carbon out of the air. Now, how is wood, utilizing more wood, detrimental to the idea of trying to contain the growth of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere? Just well, she was pretty nice about it, but I don't know where they'll go. But I think maybe they've slowed down a little bit. They've said they'll defer the regulations on that, but their lawsuit's pending, and we've got a problem there. They're working on the accounting network now, how they're going to count and analyze biogenic emissions. We do better just to pay down the debt of the United States with that money rather than hiring a bunch of people to appoint a bunch of people to count CO2 molecules. And they think it creates jobs. One of them said at one time, I think the president basically implied, well, all these companies now got to have more internal, in-house emissions experts, environmental experts, and this creates jobs. Like, if the job is not needed, you don't need to be making it happen. This isn't good for America to have people pay people to do things that aren't needed. It makes us less productive as a nation instead of more productive. Well, most of you have some impression of how this whole clean air, global warming situation occurred. I've assumed that there's some warming going on, and maybe it still is. I don't know. The theory that CO2 and methane is a blanket-like, and I never thought it was totally implausible. But how did it happen? In 1970, Congress passed a Clean Air Act, and the Clean Air Act was designed to eliminate pollutants, NOx and SOx and particulates and the things that pollute the environment, cause acid rain and that kind of thing. And we made some tremendous progress over that time. But CO2 is an odorless, tasteless gas. It has no harmful impact on our lives. It's not a pollutant. It's plant food. Plants take in CO2 and they emit oxygen. We take in oxygen and emit CO2. This is the life cycle. The whole cycle of life is based on CO2. More CO2 allows plants to grow faster. Indisputable. There's no dispute about that. It helps plants grow. Plants can grow with a higher rate of CO2 with less water than if there is less CO2 in the atmosphere. So this is not a pollutant by any. And at the time of 1970, nobody had ever discussed global warming. If anything, they were talking about global cooling in 1970. So Congress, at no time ever, gave any thought that passing the Clean Air Act would give a bureaucrat in Washington the power to control every emission of CO2 in this entire republic. And that's what they have the power to do. They can control your barbecue grill, they can control your lawnmower, your tractor, your automobile, in every factory in America. They have never, ever been given constitutional authority, statutory authority to do so. That is, I'm just telling you, that's the true fact of it. Well, how did it happen? How are they able to do this? Well, the world is warming. The ice caps are melting. The oceans are rising. And it gets to the Supreme Court. And the lawsuit says, the EPA has to regulate CO2. It's a pollutant. International IPCC, International Commission on Climate Change, or whatever, International Panel on Climate Change, says CO2 is bad. And so they contended it was a pollutant, and 5-4, your Supreme Court concluded that it was. Once they made that decision, then EPA has not only the ability, but a requirement to regulate all CO2 emissions, which means there's virtually little you can do unless you stop breathing to not be regulated by the United States EPA. It's just a really stunning thing. John Dingell, you know, the old Democratic congressman from Michigan, who was one of the authors, he served longer in Congress than anybody, recently said, I think the Supreme Court came up with a very much erroneous decision on whether the Clean Act covers greenhouse gases. I was present when we wrote that legislation, and we thought it was clear enough that we didn't clarify it, thinking that even the Supreme Court was not stupid enough to make that finding. Well, that's basically true. They had no idea, nobody dreamed that what was about to happen. And this was designed to try to give the EPA the power to protect us from polluting things. And you know, so what time we got here? You know, oh, I did? All right, you got the time? All right, I'm going to do a few more minutes, and then maybe if y'all would like, I would try to answer some questions because you've heard enough of me. I'm not happy. I know some of you probably disagree with this, but you pay me big money to come here and speak, so I'm just going to tell you what I think, right? on November 2012, the President said this, quote, "The temperature around the globe is increasing faster than was predicted even 10 years ago," close quote. So I wrote former EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson, asked her to provide the best available data that EPA would rely on to support the President's contention. Well, she responded saying there are, quote, "multiple lines of evidence that clearly demonstrate that average global temperatures are rising," close quote. Yet she did not provide any documentation to justify that statement. And so at her confirmation hearing, when she was being elevated, I presented a temperature chart at the committee demonstrating that the global temperatures have not increased in the last decade. We got a chart, the projections from the International Climate Change and all these experts were steady increases because CO2 is increasing, and they predicted under their models, the computer models, that the temperature would increase, but the temperature has not increased. Hadn't increased virtually at all in 15 years, 18 years now, at least 10. And it's just been flat, basically. So she said, well, she'd look into it further at the hearing. And then she responded in writing, saying EPA has not produced its own analysis, but we expect a definitive comparison in the IPCC's fifth assessment report. Well, they don't have any, no. So then on May 29th, the President again said, quote, "The climate is warming faster than anybody anticipated 5 or 10 years ago," close quote. It's not increasing, much less faster than anybody anticipated. It's much slower than what people anticipated. If it's increasing at all. And so all our Republicans, I got the Republican members of the committee, David Vitter from Louisiana, the leading ranking Republican. He's very good on these issues. And we asked her to provide the supporting data analysis relied on by the President showing actual global temperatures since 1979 versus IPCC predictions, including, quote, "to include an EPA-produced chart comparing actual global temperature increases since 1979. That's when satellite data became available. That's the best judge of global temperature, versus the IPCC predictions. And of course, she didn't produce the data. Because if she produced the data, it would prove that the President was wrong. Because it's not warming. And so in January of this year, I asked her before the EPW committee if the President's statement was correct, that temperatures around the globe are increasing faster than was predicted 10 years ago. And she eventually, after some pressure, said, "I can't answer that question." So I asked, well, you're asking us to spend billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars, to alter our American economy, and you don't know whether it's warming or not? What's this deal here going on? So at least it seems that they've stopped making that claim public. It's been about a year now. I hadn't heard the President again saying that temperature is increasing fast. Then you heard the deal about extreme weather. Now they're saying that storms are caused by global warming. Well, what's the facts on that? Dr. Roger Pilkey from the University of Colorado, who's a climate impacts expert, studies these issues, one of the leading people in the world, I think. He agrees that the globe is warming. He thinks there's evidence of warming. But he went on to state in his official testimony before the Environment Committee, quote, "It is misleading and just plain correct to claim that disasters associated with hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, or droughts have increased on climate timescales either in the United States or globally," close quote. Every time we have a storm, they rush out and say, oh, drought somewhere. They rush out and say it's global warming. This guy's counting, it's not hard. We've been calculating hurricanes for many decades, whether they're class 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And all you got to do is go back and add them up and see how many. Are we having more? CO2 is going up. Are we having more hurricanes? No. The answer to that is Dr. Roy Spencer from UAH testified before the committee at our request. Quote, there is little or no observational evidence that severe weather of any type has worsened in the last 30, 50, or 100 years. Close quote. American Enterprise Institute looked at the data and found, quote, in brief, tornado, hurricane, and cyclone activity are at historically low levels. Wildfires are in a long-term decline except in the government forest. There is no trend in sea level related to increases in greenhouse gases concentration. There's no trend in sea levels. You hear about that, we're going to float away. The record of the Arctic ice cover is ambiguous. There's no drought trend since 1895. And the same is true for flooding over the last 85 to 127 years. That's what they found. Yet we still have the folks trying to justify their actions, taking over huge parts of the economy, taking over your lawnmower, based on the theory that they're protecting us from global warming and storms. Young people remember the Kingston Trio song. They're starving in Africa. They're starving in Africa. It's raining in Spain. The whole world is full of strife, and Texas needs rain. I mean, what's needed? Dr. Holden, the president's science advisor, and he's part of, what's his anti-growth guy, Ehrlich. Goes back, I think has a pretty radical background, but he's the top science advisor for America. And so I asked him about the storms because the president was going out to California to create a $1 billion climate resistance fund. And Dr. Holden said, quote, you can certainly expect that the president will talk about the connection between the increasing frequency and intensity of droughts and climate change when he speaks tomorrow. He actually repeatedly talked about the connection between climate change and he has actually and repeatedly talked about the connection between climate change and extreme weather, close quote. So this is the president's science. I'm saying what the president's going to be talking about. And he goes out to California and basically talks about that. But I challenged him on the numbers, and they don't have any answer. And he and Dr. Pilkey got in a squabble because he demeaned Dr. Pilkey's numbers. I guess if Dr. Pilkey's numbers are correct, he's as bogus as a $3 bill. So his result was to attack the man who actually knows what he's talking about. So that's a little squabble. But I guess I'm saying to you, we're working on these issues. They're important issues. We want to protect the environment. We need to do things that are smart to make our environment better, healthier, and produce more trees. We just need to do those kind of things. But we can't be stampeded by a massive governmental power grab based on faulty science. So science, at least, is not meeting their qualifications. So, all right. A couple of things, and I'll wrap up. And we are seeing the United States is from 2005 through 2011, we've reduced CO2 emissions by 8.5%. During that period, Europe reduced theirs by 10%. But globally, CO2 emissions are going up significantly. 15% globally, 60% in China, 40%, 6% in India. So our role in this, we're doing better, and I believe renewable forest products can play a role in helping keep those numbers down. I visited the pellet plant over at Crossville yesterday. I saw some of you that went to that. Well, I think that's a healthy thing. You take basically waste wood with little value out of the forest, helps you replant effectively, and create energy for it. It could be done in the United States. I had a sense of how that worked better after that visit than I did before. We have 6 plants now, I think, in Alabama. We've got them in Selma, Jackson, Aliceville, several other places around the state. And we might see that expand. So it has, I think, positive environmental benefits by any stretch of imagination, certainly renewable CO2, and I think provides additional source of revenue for the landowner. And jobs. We met with a forester and the logger who actually goes out, and I asked them how they did this, and does it work? And the answer was, yes, this system is working. They don't get any government money, direct money. They go out and they're able to bring in the wood at marginal value, make it into pellets, use it to heat chicken houses and burn people's wood stoves, and ship it to Europe to be burned over there as a renewable fuel to create electricity. And they're doing that right now. So we got a growing thing. I think that's good. I think it's another outlet for your product. Alabama timber. And I would say I'm uneasy about the American economy. I wish it were better. It's, you know, the talking heads on the business channel, they all, I think they're salesmen more than anything else sometimes, I think. But the numbers this week show 24,000 increase in the number of people claiming unemployment insurance this week. We had a 14-year low in mortgage origination. Economic growth, fourth quarter last year was 1.9%. Experts 2 years before that were predicting 4% economic growth for 2013. It came in at 1.9. The first quarter this year is not good. And so I guess I would say to you, we're not achieving the kind of growth we'd like to achieve. If you were asked to lay out a plan to increase economic growth for America, would you have the government take over a larger portion of the economy, including health care? Would you raise taxes? Would you increase government regulations throughout the economy? Would you ban offshore production and Keystone Pipeline and reduce oil and gas production on government lands? Would you do those kind of things? Would you impose greater and greater cost on the economy as a result of climate change? Would you spend more money than the government takes in by huge amounts? Would you increase debt year after year to try to stimulate the economy in a way that history is telling us isn't working? But I guess I would say to you, first, if you're in a hole, stop digging. First, if things aren't going well, stop making it worse. And those things are not good. So I just believe if we get this economy, I believe there's still vitality in the American psyche and the American people, but we're not doing well. Average wages, and you need to worry about people who work for you. Average wages have gone down. Median income for working Americans is $2,600 less than what it was, I think, in 2005. That is not a good trend. Unemployment, the percentage of working age people actually working today has hit levels of 1975. It's been a steady decline. It's been accelerated in recent years. So I guess I would say to you, what we need to do is develop policies that make life better for the average American. And that means creating better jobs, creating growth, creating higher wages. And you just can't pass laws and demand and say what wages need to be. You need to create the kind of growth and prosperity that generates enough money that people have to pay more to get good workers. Some of y'all don't like to pay more for workers. We want more workers for less. But I represent workers. Sorry. I want higher wages for American people. And in the long run, they may be able to buy a house and buy some of your timber, which is what we'd like to see. And so I am of a view that we need to take some pretty clear action and get off the path we're on and make a tax policy that creates growth and prosperity. We need to produce more American energy, every bit that we possibly can here, creating jobs and ultimately containing the rise in the cost of that. We need to get our financial house in order so we're not heading off a debt cliff. Interest last year on the debt, according to the Congressional Budget Office, was $230 billion. The defense budget's $500, it's almost half the defense budget. Social Security is $750, the biggest item in the budget. But Dr. Elmendorf, the head of the budget office, told us in sworn testimony before the Budget Committee earlier this year that their projections, based on an increase, expected modest increase in interest rates, not dramatic, modest increase, a return to the mean, that in 10 years, the annual interest payment would be $880 billion based on our present trends. So the fastest growing item in our entire budget is interest on the debt, nothing close. Our highway bill is $40 billion. The ag bill is $100 billion. $80 billion of that is food stamps. $20 billion goes to the farmers. So this is the kind of path we're on that we need to get off on. And one of the policies needs to be to try to create our aid office, our welfare office, our support office, and in a determined way, make that a job office, a job creation office, where people come in, they get temporary help, but they're asked to do something. And we help them find the job, put them on the right path, and show them the way. And at some point, if they refuse, we can't ask hardworking Americans to support them. So, thank you all. It's been a pleasure to have the weekend with you. I wish it had been a little longer. I will value time less. I hope to be a member of your group, and maybe I can learn something and do a little better back home in Hibbert, Alabama. Thank you all, and God bless.